The grandfather clock in the marble foyer of the Manhattan penthouse chimed softly as 37-year-old Alexander Sterling quietly let himself into his home after returning from an emergency business trip to London. The flight had been delayed by 6 hours due to weather, and what should have been a 3-day trip had stretched into 5 days of crucial negotiations that could not be postponed, even for a single father with a young daughter. Alexander loosened his tie and set down his briefcase, moving carefully through the elegantly appointed living room so as not to wake anyone. The penthouse, with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, was decorated in soft, sophisticated tones that reflected both his success as a tech entrepreneur and his desire to create a warm home for his 2-year-old daughter, Isabella. As Alexander made his way toward Isabella's nursery to check on her, he noticed a faint light coming from beneath her door. Concerned that something might be wrong, he approached quietly and gently pushed the door open just enough to see inside. What he saw stopped him completely in his tracks. His daughter's nanny, 26-year-old Emma Collins, was sleeping on the hardwood floor beside Isabella's crib, using only a small throw pillow and a thin blanket. She was still wearing the simple beige dress she had worn to work that morning, now wrinkled from sleeping in it, and her blonde hair was pulled back in a messy bun that suggested she had been caring for someone for many hours without rest. Isabella herself was sleeping fitfully in her crib, and Alexander could see even in the dim light that his daughter's cheeks were flushed with fever. A digital thermometer, bottles of children's medicine, and damp washcloths were arranged on the nearby changing table, evidence of the careful monitoring and care that Emma had been providing. Alexander felt his heart clench as he realized what had happened. Isabella had obviously fallen ill while he was away, and Emma had been caring for her around the clock, sleeping on the floor so she could respond immediately if the little girl needed anything during the night. Alexander stepped back from the doorway and leaned against the hallway wall, overwhelmed by a mixture of emotions. As a successful businessman, he was accustomed to people working hard for him, but this was different. This was someone who had chosen to sacrifice her own comfort completely for the well-being of his child, going far beyond what anyone could reasonably expect from an employee. Emma had been working for Alexander for 8 months, ever since his previous nanny had moved to California with her family. From the beginning, Emma had impressed him with her qualifications. She had a degree in early childhood development, excellent references, and a natural warmth that made Isabella light up whenever she arrived for work. But what Alexander was witnessing now went beyond professional competence. This was pure devotion. Alexander quietly retreated to his study to gather his thoughts and decide how to handle the situation. He had built his fortune by recognizing exceptional talent and dedication when he saw it, but Emma's behavior represented something that could not be bought or negotiated. She was treating Isabella as if she were her own child, providing the kind of love and care that went far beyond a job description. As Alexander sat in his leather chair, surrounded by the awards and photographs that documented his business success, he found himself thinking about what really mattered in life. He had been able to provide Isabella with every material advantage, the best schools, the finest clothes, toys that most children could only dream of. But what Emma was giving his daughter was something infinitely more valuable: the security of knowing that someone who loved her was always nearby, ready to comfort and protect her. Alexander also found himself thinking about Emma as a person, rather than just as an employee. He knew that she lived in a small studio apartment in Queens, commuting over an hour each way to work in Manhattan. He knew that she was putting herself through graduate school at night, working toward a master's degree in child psychology. He knew that she sent money home to her parents in Ohio, who were struggling with medical bills after her father's heart attack. What he had not fully appreciated until this moment was the depth of Emma's character and the genuine love she had developed for Isabella. Alexander made a decision that would surprise everyone, including himself. The next morning, Alexander woke early and prepared breakfast for Isabella and Emma, something he had not done since the early days after his wife died and he was still learning to navigate single parenthood. When Emma emerged from Isabella's room, carrying the little girl who was already looking much better after a night of careful attention, she was surprised to find Alexander in the kitchen. "Mr. Sterling," Emma said, clearly flustered by his unexpected return and her own disheveled appearance. "I did not know you were back. I am so sorry about how I look. Isabella had a fever for the past 2 days, and I wanted to stay close to make sure she was comfortable." "Emma," Alexander said gently, "please sit down. We need to talk." Emma's face went pale, and Alexander realized she was interpreting his serious tone as a sign that she was in trouble. "Mr. Sterling, I know I should have called you immediately when Isabella got sick, but the doctors said it was just a common childhood virus, and I knew how important your meetings were."
"Emma, you are not in trouble," Alexander said quickly. "In fact, I owe you an enormous debt of gratitude. When I checked on Isabella last night, I saw you sleeping on the floor beside her crib. I realized that you had been caring for her around the clock, sacrificing your own comfort to make sure she had everything she needed." Emma looked embarrassed by his recognition of her dedication. "Any mother would have done the same thing, Mr. Sterling. Isabella needed someone to be there, and I could not bear the thought of her being scared or uncomfortable while she was sick." Alexander felt something shift in his understanding of his relationship with Emma. "Any mother would have done the same thing," he repeated slowly. "Emma, do you think of Isabella as your own daughter?" Emma's eyes filled with tears, and she looked down at Isabella, who was contentedly eating the breakfast Alexander had prepared. "I hope that is not inappropriate, Mr. Sterling. I know she is not my child, but I love her as if she were. She has become the most important thing in my life." Alexander sat down across from Emma and Isabella, and when he spoke, his voice was filled with emotion. "Emma, what would you say if I told you that I wanted to make that relationship official?" Emma looked confused. "I do not understand what you mean." "I mean," Alexander said, his heart beating faster as he prepared to say something he had never expected to say. "What would you say if I asked you to marry me? Not for business reasons, not for convenience, but because I have fallen in love with the woman who loves my daughter enough to sleep on the floor beside her crib when she is sick." Emma stared at him in shock, clearly struggling to process what he had just said. "Mr. Sterling, I do not know what to say." "You could start by calling me Alexander," he said with a gentle smile. "And you could tell me if you think you might be able to love me the way you already love Isabella." Emma looked at this man who had just offered her everything she had never dared to dream of, and slowly began to smile. "Alexander, I think I have been falling in love with you for months, but I never imagined that someone like you could have feelings for someone like me." "Someone like you?" Alexander repeated. "Emma, you are someone who puts the needs of a child before your own comfort. You are someone who works multiple jobs to support your family and pursue your education. You are someone who loves without conditions or expectations. You are exactly the kind of person I want to spend my life with." Isabella, who had been listening to the adult conversation with the serious attention that young children sometimes give to important moments, looked up at Emma and said clearly, "Mama." Both Alexander and Emma laughed through their tears at Isabella's perfect timing. 6 months later, Alexander and Emma were married in a small ceremony attended by their families and closest friends. Emma wore a beautiful white dress, but what made her glow was not the expensive fabric or elegant styling. It was the pure joy of officially becoming the mother she had already been to Isabella in every way that mattered. Isabella served as the flower girl, todding down the aisle in a pink dress that matched the roses in her hair, delighting everyone with her confident walk and bright smile. During his wedding speech, Alexander told their guests about the night he had found Emma sleeping on the floor beside Isabella's crib. "I realized that night," he said, "that love is not about grand gestures or expensive gifts. Love is about being willing to sleep on a hard floor if that is what it takes to care for someone who needs you." Emma taught me that the most valuable things in life cannot be purchased, they can only be given freely from one heart to another. Emma, now Emma Sterling, continued her graduate studies and eventually opened a child development center that became one of the most respected programs in the city. But she never forgot the lesson she had learned during those long hours on the nursery floor, that love means being present for the people who matter most, regardless of the personal cost. Alexander learned that true wealth is not measured in bank accounts or business achievements, but in the depth of the relationships we build and the love we share with the people who become our family. And Isabella grew up knowing that she was blessed with parents who had chosen each other not for convenience or advantage, but because they both understood that the most important job in the world is taking care of the people we love. Sometimes the most profound love stories begin not with romance or passion, but with the simple recognition that someone else values what matters most to us as much as we do ourselves. Alexander and Emma's marriage was built on the foundation of shared devotion to Isabella, but it grew into something beautiful because they both understood that real love means putting family first, no matter what sacrifices that might require.